Right, time now for the International Press Review. And Deeptika Laurent is here on set for a look at what's making headlines around the world. Hello, Deepti.
Hello.
We're starting with Malaysia, where voters are heading to the polls on Wednesday in national elections.
That's right, national elections, the combat begins. That's what one Malaysian newspaper, Chinese language Malaysian newspaper, says on its front page. There are really two frontrunners ahead of Wednesday's election. You have Najib Razak, the incumbent Prime Minister, and his former mentor, Mahathir Mohamad, who at 92 years old is contesting these
92?
92 years old. He was also former leader of Malaysia, so he's essentially coming out of his political retirement to save the country, he says. While another Malaysian paper, The Star, says it's a rush to midnight. Indeed, both candidates are trying to amass as many votes as they can before the midnight deadline when campaigning ends. Ahead of that, at 10 p.m. Malaysian time, both candidates will also be addressing their supporters in last-ditch speeches.
Well, the local papers aren't sitting on the fence about this election, are they?
No one's really left divided about this. For the pro-government New Straits Times paper, Malaysians face a choice. There's a choice between Mohamad, whose party governance would be a, quote, disaster for Malaysia, and you have Razak, who they say has strengthened the economy and enabled greater free speech and democracy in Malaysia. And this is where you see that pro-government slant, because in the Financial Times, they remind us that the government's recent fake news law passed by Razak, I quote, threatens the very notion of free speech. I quote the paper, which says, it's a strange state of affairs when the candidate offering the most hope of change is a one-time authoritarian who has reached the ripe old age of 92.
OK. Well, to Italy now, where the president has put forward the idea of a neutral government in a bid to break the political deadlock.
A political deadlock, Rochelle, that's been there since March, since the elections in March. This as the anti-establishment five-star movement has failed to agree on joining forces with either the right-wing alliance, Forza Italia and the League, or the centre-left Democratic Party. Now, on Monday, after the latest coalition talks failed, President Sergio Mattarella has suggested a short-term neutral government, but the Democratic Party is in favor of this. However, you have the Five-Star Movement and the League, which have rejected this option outright. They say they want new elections in July. It's a government of nobody, essentially. That's what the paper Il Fatto Quotidiano says on its front page.
OK, well, we're moving on now to the resignation of New York's Attorney General Eric Schneiderman over sexual assault allegations.
That's right. He was actually announced that resignation following revelations made in The New Yorker in an article penned by Ronan Farrow, who you'll remember has really been at the forefront of revealing or reporting on such allegations since the Harvey Weinstein scandal. Eric Schneiderman, New York's Attorney General, has resigned. He was a champion of women's rights. He was at the forefront of the Me Too movement. Well, he's facing a reckoning of his own. That's what The New Yorker says. 4 women are accusing him of non-consensual physical, verbal, and sexual violence. And the irony is unmissable. As Mashable notes, Schneiderman has resigned for the very alleged crimes that he has accused and is prosecuting Harvey Weinstein for.
Wow, OK. Well, changing gears now, Australian actor Russell Crowe has gotten his own back in a joke with the talk show host John Oliver. I love this story.
That's right. It's a great story. You'll remember that back in April, Russell Crowe held a quote-unquote divorce auction. He basically sold off a whole bunch of movie memorabilia to pay for his upcoming divorce. Now, during that auction, the talk show host John Oliver paid nearly 80 grand for what he called a, quote, bunch of pointless Russell Crowe memorabilia, including 8 grand that he spent on a leather jockstrap that Russell Crowe wore during the film Cinderella Man.
There's apparently unwashed.
Oh, boy, I don't even want to get into the details. I cannot confirm that. Well, these items were actually donated to struggling Blockbuster video chains in Alaska by John Oliver. And in fact, in one of those stores is now they're displaying very proudly that jockstrap worn by Russell Crowe. Now, the San Francisco Chronicle reports that Russell Crowe said he was going to come up with a way to spend the money that John Oliver spent during that auction. Now he's used that money, he's announced, to have a koala chlamydia unit in Australia named after John Oliver. Koala chlamydia, who knew it? It's a big thing.
It is a big thing, and if you want to see the proof, the visual proof, there is John Oliver talks about this story on the last episode of Last Week Tonight.
That's
I don't know if you've seen that, DT. Right, finally, you found this story from South Africa about the trials and tribulations of a group of thieves.
Well, this story was picked up by the foreign press from local South African papers that were reporting about a group of thieves who jacked a car in Cape Town recently. Upon being pursued by the police, the thieves ended up driving their car right into a maximum security prison facility. Incidentally, the prison that they drove into was the one that Nelson Mandela was held in between 1982 and 1988. No accolades for these thieves, though. The local press in South Africa have labeled them the stupidest criminals in Cape Town.
Well, I suppose they were getting a head start, or doing the police,
the work of the police.
Exactly, the job for them. Diptyque Laurent with the International Press Review there. Thank you so much for that.